lost in the shadows of who she used to be. Does mom have a name?
Well, welcome back everyone to our first episode of 2025. Hey Nicole, how are you going? We've actually had a break and we've got so many good news things to tell our listeners.
We have, yeah. So it was such a nice break over Christmas. Just we wanted to give ourselves just the month of January to, I guess, reset and come up with some plans for the year for our podcast. And I think we're starting off the year with a great topic.
Yes, and I think this is relevant to both of us because you've started a new role and I've secured a new contract. So we've got new beginnings for both of us.
We do. And actually, just that topic itself is really great for what we're talking about today because it's actually something that Deb and I have both gone through ourselves, and that is imposter syndrome. And
Yes.
we really wanted to get into that and talk about our experiences as well as Deb can help us explain what exactly imposter syndrome is.
Yeah. So, listeners, have you ever felt like you've just been pretending to know what you're actually doing, like you don't actually deserve the success that you've achieved? Well, that is typically called imposter syndrome. Okay. And we are taking a deep dive into that today. And we're both very excited about sharing this because it is so common.
Yeah, and
So,
something we've both gone through ourselves.
absolutely. So, why is this topic so important? Because either people just don't know what imposter syndrome is, or they've actually got myths about imposter syndrome. So we are going to deep dive, as I said, because it affects so many people, professionals, mothers, students, business owners. But the thing is, it's rarely discussed, Nicole.
Yeah. And what I've found too, it's like some people are embarrassed by it and not wanting to admit it. But lately, I've
Yeah,
met a few women who are quite open about the fact that they have imposter syndrome. And I went, wow, like it's actually something that people are acknowledging now. And so it'd be great if we can get into it and help other people understand what it is.
absolutely. So before we do go into a deep dive, let us know, let's share with the listeners a little bit about how we have experienced imposter syndrome. So, Nicole, can you share a time, like maybe recently?
Yeah. So I have great news. So recently I have been given a new job and I'm so excited about it. So I'm now the general manager of behavior support for Brilliant Life Services. And it's a perfect time, especially when we're discussing imposter syndrome, because I think going into that interview, I had imposter syndrome where I felt like, am I good enough to be in that role? Am I good enough to be even applying for that role? You know, but at the end of the day, I still did it. I still applied for it because I felt that I was ready for that role. And obviously, I got that role. So they have faith in me that I have the experience to do that job. But imposter syndrome is real. And if you don't find a way to work through that, it can really stop you from getting experiences and opportunities. And I'm sure, Deb, you've had many, examples of that as well.
Well, absolutely. I mean, going back to doing my master's in counseling, like even when we would have residentials where we would have to get together and I would get complimented on, the way I did something, like I came across as confident or I came across as empathetic or warm. I was like, oh, they just don't know me because, like I'm so scared. And really, are you seeing that? And then when I did finish my counseling, it took me so long to be able to acknowledge that I'd worked so hard for that and I'd studied so hard to be where I had gotten to, but still felt like an imposter.
Yeah.
Thought, oh, they might like me now and they might have had a great session, but one day they might see that I'm a fake. But it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Even more recently, like I said, just before Christmas, I secured another contract with another organization, Central Coast Behavior Support, absolutely amazing organization, and got on with the beautiful owner. really well. And sometimes you walk away feeling on a high, but I think sometimes then you come down on a little bit of a low going, oh, can I do this? Do they, like, uh, I don't know. Let's have a deep dive into it and see
Yeah.
why. Okay.
Why we're doing these
Now,
things. Yeah.
yeah. So I think the reason why it was so important for Nicole and I was because we want to normalize the experience. We want
Yeah.
to offer real strategies that have helped us. And we want other people, like listeners, particularly, to recognize and manage their own imposter syndrome.
Yeah. And I just wanted to start off and say too, yes, you can see Deb and I both recording from
Oh,
our bedroom
yes.
today. And that's because we wanted you guys to see our real lives. And Saturdays for us are all about self-care. And today we thought, hey, let's do this topic from our bed because this is how we spend some of our Saturdays. So why not invite you in and you can share it with us and we can have this conversation and hopefully we can all get a better understanding about why we do these things to ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. I actually, mum was trying to get in touch with me this morning and she said, your phone's just going to voicemail. She said it in a text. I said, Mum, I'm not doing people today. I'm just not. I'm doing carbs and Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So why don't we start off with what is imposter syndrome? Like, what actually is it?
Absolutely. So the definition of imposter syndrome is the feeling that you're a fraud, despite all the achievements, qualifications, skills, positive feedback that prove otherwise.
Yeah. Okay.
So, can you hear the imbalance already? We're already thinking one, we're a fraud, but we've got achievements, qualifications, feedback.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're not connecting up. Our brains aren't connecting with what we have and what we're doing. Kind of. That's the way I'm breaking it
Yeah,
down. Yeah.
it's quite interesting because when we would do go into it a bit deeper, the brain has got a lot to answer for.
It does. It does. So so I'm thinking basically it's like having all the proof that we are
Yes,
capable, but it's like doubting that part. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah. So which is
yeah,
crazy, really. It is. It's so crazy to think that we do that. But yes, thinking that we don't deserve to be somewhere when we actually do.
that's right,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think we're excited because just understanding imposter syndrome, it's just crazy. There's so many deep little inner things, and we can't wait to share it with you. So the interesting thing was for me, Nicole, was it was the term imposter syndrome was coined by psychologists back in 1978. Okay, that was Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes, I think her name is. But they were studying high achieving women who felt like they didn't deserve their success. Like, really, I think we both fall into that category.
Definitely. Definitely. So I think so if someone's thinking to themselves, hey, this sounds a little bit familiar, or thinking that maybe they have imposter syndrome. So what do you think some of the common symptoms of imposter syndrome are?
Oh, okay, let's have a look. So some people put it down that the success is luck. Okay. So they may pass an exam or get a promotion and they might just put it off, oh, that was just good luck, instead of recognizing all of that hard work. So I want to start off by saying all the things that we're talking about, they're not in isolation. Okay. There's never just one symptom or one cause. So have a listen to the things that we're sharing with you guys, and it could be at least two to three, more. Okay.
Yeah.
Another fear of about or a symptom is the fear of being exposed as a fraud. Okay, so um, I don't know, because you're convinced people will find out that you're not as good as they think.
Yeah.
How common is that?
It is. And I actually read somewhere that just that symptom alone goes two ways.
Yeah.
You either overachieve or you
Yes.
isolate. You don't do anything because the fear of being caught out, it's you either do one or
Yes.
the other. So that was an interesting fact that I read.
That's right. You either overachieve or you procrastinate. And, when you said, let's do this, and I was researching and getting our notes so that we knew what we wanted to really express to our listeners, oh my Lord, the amount of high achieving women that were coming to mind, and even procrastinators,
Yeah.
and it made me really understand some of my friends that little bit better.
Do you know, Deb, I
Yeah.
had an interview once with someone and I was like rolling off all the things that I've done in my life. And, I have this degree and I have these certificates and I do this and I do that. And he said to me, well, aren't you the overachiever? And I was like,
Yes.
I never thought about it that way, but when you're hearing that spiel in that moment, I guess that was me with my imposter syndrome, trying to, let him know how great I was. But yeah, it's funny when you realize something in that moment and you think, wow, true. Like, so I definitely
Yes.
fall into that symptom. Yeah.
Well, I fall into the next one, so I don't know about you. Downplaying achievements and minimizing skills.
Yeah.
So, as an example, a friend or colleague praises your work, and instead of saying thank you, you say, "Oh, it was nothing really," or "I just got lucky." Lucky. My go-to comment is, "Oh, don't worry. If I can do it, anyone can do it."
Yeah. Yeah. I have heard you say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the next symptom, is what you were just talking about, overworking or procrastinating to
Yeah.
prove worth.
Yeah. And
So people overwork,
yeah, feeling like
they work harder.
anyone else. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, just to feel like they deserve the position or the role. And like you said before, the procrastinators, they avoid starting tasks because they fear failure. So they put things off until the last minute. I used to be like that early in my education when I was doing my bachelor's.
Yeah.
I would get, I thought I'd had to be perfect and I thought I had to know everything. So I would get so anxious and procrastinate and then leave it to that last minute and do it the night before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can see that someone with imposter syndrome will either burn out or,
Yes,
they obviously at the other end where they just put it off to a point where they just don't get it done. So either way, it's bad for us. Either way, whichever
it's
way,
not healthy.
oh, it's not healthy. So
Yeah,
yeah, and it would be exhausting. It's exhausting to fit into either of those categories as well. So yeah.
absolutely. And the last common symptom is, again, I think both of us struggling to accept praise or positive feedback. So someone compliments your skills and you instantly brush it off, oh, as they were just being nice. And I remember giving you a call once, Nicole, saying I'd seen a family that I'd been seeing. It was a review, but I'd known them for about 3 years. And at the end, when they were seeing me out, they were like, "Thank you so much, Deb. You've been so great for our family." I felt so uncomfortable. I
Yeah.
just didn't know how to receive that compliment because I don't know. How do you read that, Nicole?
Well, Deb, you've been getting those compliments for years because you help a lot of families, and I'm sure it's not the first time that you've heard that compliment. So I think that it falls into that, like you said, if I can do it, anyone can do it. I'm just doing my job. But at the end of the day, you're not just doing your job because you're going over and above what you're meant to be doing, which is why the families are so receptive to what you're doing for them. So, but taking a compliment is very hard. It is. It's awkward sometimes, and I struggle with it myself. And yeah, something we need to work on as well.
Yeah, I said to you, I just found it so hard to take that as a compliment. And it's strange because I was conflicted inside. I acknowledged myself, but I still was feeling a bit uncomfortable. So yeah.
Still doubting if
Okay.
you're doing the right thing or, you know, should you be there?
I know. And I actually even thought, no, no, I haven't done that much.
Yeah.
And then when I reflect back, I actually met this family. They had no supports around them. Now, 3 years later, they've got a coordinator of support. They have the young person has a counselor. He's nonverbal, but she's just absolutely amazing with him. They have a respite service. They have their physiotherapist. So it's a team that's handling everything. And I don't want to this is how I feel. I feel like I'm big noting myself. But I was the first person on that team and I just helped pull other team members into it.
Yeah. Which at the end of the day isn't your job as a behavior support practitioner, but it's your job, as a behavior support practitioner to go above and beyond, like, and do those things and because we can see the gaps and we can see what they need. But again, like, if you didn't have that experience, you wouldn't be there and you wouldn't be working with that family. So I guess it sneaks into our lives every day, and
It
even
does.
how we react to those comments.
It's the sneaky little bugger.
It is sneaky.
You want to chat about how common it is?
Yeah. So what surprised me was how many women struggle with imposter syndrome. Okay. So I actually read a statistic recently that said 75% of women have experienced imposter syndrome in the last 12 months in their lives. So it's
Yeah.
not just getting jobs, it's in, like mums, it's any occasion. So one thing,
Yeah.
person who really struck me was Lena, I think it's Dunham. She's the creator of Girls. Love her work. And yet she struggles really bad with imposter syndrome, which had
Mm,
talked about it, I would have no idea.
yeah.
So again, but also I think too, when you have women who are also autistic, who are masking, so we have the imposter syndrome, we have the masking. So again, it becomes very exhausting. Michelle Obama, did you know that she struggles with imposter syndrome? She's like the most
You know what?
woman I've
Yeah,
seen on TV. So that really surprised me.
I know. I know. And you can understand when we could dig into it, you can understand why these people do. Okay. You can put pieces together and think why they do. But you're absolutely right. 70%, that's a hell of a lot. 70 out of 100 people in their lifetime will feel imposter syndrome. And it's not just for women, I remember hearing Tom Hanks, and I've got a quote here, and I remember actually seeing this myself when he was being interviewed, and he said, no matter what I've done, I still sometimes think, when are they going to discover that I'm a fraud?
Yeah.
That's Tom Hanks. I adore Tom Hanks.
Same. He's saying. And you know what? He's worked his way up and he deserves to be where he is. But if someone like Tom Hanks has experienced that, like what the rest of us have got like to get to that point. So another one that surprised me was Albert Einstein.
I know, right?
Like
Yeah,
clearly one of the smartest people in the world, and yet he still has imposter syndrome and still struggles to get recognition for what he did.
that's right. And they didn't have the word imposter syndrome, but he called himself an involuntary swindler.
Yeah. So if Einstein feels like an imposter, like I feel like we probably need to give ourselves a break. If he's experiencing it, well, yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So we can actually see that it's not ability, it's actually our brain playing
yeah,
tricks on us. Yeah, yeah. And that leads me into the common misconceptions.
yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So what are you talking
So
about? Imposter syndrome is not.
yes, what imposter syndrome is not. So people think only unsuccessful people feel imposter syndrome. But the reality is, like you said, it actually affects high achievers the most. So the more successful you are, the more likely the bar keeps getting higher.
Yeah.
Okay. And I didn't realize this, but there's, like even doctors, but we'll go into that a little bit later. Yeah. Another myth is it's just low self-esteem. And I believe that as a young adult or as a child, a teenager as well. I thought, oh, it's self-esteem. But it's not just a lack of confidence. It's actually a distorted belief system,
Yeah.
which is, and then we go even deeper. It's quite interesting, isn't it? Other people, another myth is, oh, once you're experienced, it will go away. But like I said, never goes away.
A good example for that. So I went for a job interview once where I went in and I thought, this is when I first graduated. So Bachelor of Criminology, Criminal Justice. I thought, great, I'm ready. I'm going to go get a job. So I'm sitting in the waiting room and these women are there and they had master's degrees, right? So I thought, I'm not going to get this job because already I'm the least experienced person in this room, and then, another lady walked in and she had a PhD in, I think it was something with criminology. And then I remember looking at the ladies with the master's degree, seeing their disappointment in their face,
Oh,
absolute.
wow.
So everybody there felt the same way. It didn't matter who had what degree. We
Yeah.
felt like we weren't educated enough.
Yeah.
But we all had
Yeah.
the basic education. So it's,
So
yeah.
you're looking at these people with masters
Yeah.
with your bachelor thinking, no, I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And you've noticed that they're looking at this person with a PhD and they're not thinking they're good enough.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter where we stand with our education, we all feel the same way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So for our listeners, should we just do a really quick reality check, and ask our listeners a few questions just for them to ponder?
Yeah. Sounds good.
All right. So if you struggle with imposter syndrome, answer these questions. Did you actually put in effort to where you are today or where you got to? Do you have evidence, positive feedback, results, progress that you belong here? Are there people recognizing your skills and contributions? Is it possible that your brain is lying to you about your worth? Now, if you answered yes to any of these, you're not an imposter. You're just experiencing normal self-doubt.
Yeah. They are
Okay.
great questions. And I actually mentioned this to you earlier, Deb, but I was on TikTok today and I saw a TikTok from a lady called Carla Harris. And she said, "Are you enough?" And she said, "You are ready." And she said, "You are not in this space if you are not intellectually ready, experiences that would allow you to go forward. You have people in your network who have already been where you are and have done that." And she said, "If you're not feeling confident in yourself, borrow some of their confidence until you can grow your own." And it actually really struck a chord with me because I thought, wow, like that's broken down and simple, but so it just hit me in a way where I thought, wow, that's exactly what imposter syndrome is for me anyway. So it'll be interesting to
Love
hear
that.
the feedback that we get from our listeners and times that they've felt this way.
You know what? I think of you when you say that because how many times I've probably borrowed confidence.
Well, I think we did when we started doing behavior support because I know how many times we've doubted ourselves and,
Yeah.
doubted our work, doubted our report writing, doubted, and at the end of the day, we've had success. We've had happy families, compliments, we've got yeah, we had no reason to doubt ourselves.
And I know, like I remember thinking I always wanted to do, I'm a learner. I love being educated. I just will do that till the day I die, I suppose. And thinking, I did my bachelor's and I'm going to apply for my master's, and that was really exciting. But then I completed my master's and I thought, oh wow, if I can do it, anyone can do it. Like I
Yeah.
didn't value that dedication that I had put into it.
Yeah.
I really played it down.
I did too when I graduated with my degree. I didn't go to my graduation because I was having a baby at that point. So I'd actually studied my degree while I was pregnant and giving birth. And then I didn't celebrate it. So it was just a piece of paper that came in the mail. So there wasn't that, that looking
The
back,
celebration.
I should have celebrated it more because it was such a huge achievement for me during that time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
hey guys, we're coming from experience,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it's very normal, very normal. So if you think this sounds like you, just stick around because we've got so many more things that we want to talk about.
Yeah.
I
So,
think what we will talk about next, Nicole, is
yeah.
probably the common groups that are most affected by
Okay.
imposter syndrome.
Okay. Sounds good. So let's break it down because I can see we have 5 groups here. So let's break it down and who they are.
So we've mentioned this before. High achievers and professionals, number one, okay? Doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, academics. And why? Because they set such high expectations for themselves. Two, because they work in high pressure environments where mistakes feel unacceptable. Well, like if you're a surgeon, that would. They feel like they need to prove themselves constantly. That's another thing. So I'll give you an example. A doctor who has performed countless successful surgeries, but still thinks, what if I make a mistake and everyone realizes that I'm not as skilled as they think?
Mhm. So can you imagine being a brain surgeon and then feeling like a fraud? Like
I
how
know.
easy would that be? It just shows you how strong imposter syndrome can be. And it doesn't matter what your level of education is, we all still experience it.
Absolutely. And this happens in many fields: therapists, lawyers, professors, CEOs. And the fact is, the more responsibility you have, the greater the pressure to measure up.
Yeah. So I see here the studies show imposter syndrome is most common in high achievers because they set up impossibly high standards for themselves.
That's right. That's right. So we did look into the research, and that is the most common. So we talked about that with the myth that, we thought that, or some people might think that it's the uneducated, but yeah, no, it's not. Oh,
Okay.
now this is the next one, number two. This is a,
Align with us.
a group close to our hearts.
Mothers and caregivers, which the Superman effect, no, Superman effect, let me say that again. And caregivers, the supermom effect. It could be Superman, but yeah, supermom effect.
Yeah, yeah. And why? Because societal pressure says we've got to do it all perfectly.
I think
And
social
this is this
that as well, because yeah, we're looking at social media, we're looking at other women, we're looking at it's really setting a standard for who and what we are, and especially it's a comparison with other women. Yeah.
absolutely comparison trap. I mean, in any area, comparison is just a thief. We cannot compare ourselves no matter what role or area we are in. And, unfortunately, it does feed imposter syndrome because, like you say, like I'm not much of a social media person,
Uh-huh.
Nick, but you are, and you share your stories, like who you're following and why you respect them and all that, and which is great. But sometimes people can see just the perfectness in those people, and they don't realize the how they've struggled to get where they are.
We see the ups, not the downs.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
everybody's, I think every person's felt that way, even if they're not on social media. We're still, it might be a
Oh,
or it might be someone they've seen on TV where they think, wow, this person's great, and start wanting to follow them. But we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. So I think it's a common thing for everybody.
absolutely. And like you say, they don't even have to be people that are follow social media like me. Like constantly, probably not so much now, or it's changed form. But I used to look at myself and think, I'm just not doing enough for my children. And, I took my eldest son out for dinner a few nights ago, and we had a brilliant night. It was just to catch up. And I think I heard myself say, if there's anything that you need to tell me that I've done wrong, we need to talk about this. And I realized he looked at me and goes, that's pretty heavy. And I was like, yeah, it is actually. Maybe we'll drop that. Oh,
Yeah.
it's funny.
Good question though. I must admit, I've asked Dale that question. I've said, as a mum, what did I do right and what did I do wrong? Especially around his autism and,
Yeah,
because Dale's black and white, he just comes back and says, "You're a great mum. I'm still here."
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
that was
yeah,
so, and I think too, like something that I've seen with imposter syndrome, especially on social media, it can really create a guilt with mums. Like mum guilt is such a huge thing. So like I'm following all these women who are suddenly there's a whole thing about growing your own vegetables and milking your own cows and becoming organic and becoming, like Little House on the Prairie. That's the way I imagine it. I live in a suburban area in a brick house, don't have room for vegetables. I'm certainly not going to milk a cow, but I still do those things. Like I love watching those things. Like it's still, but I wonder how much of that stuff they're actually doing, you know,
yes,
taking little snippets. So I think that creates,
that's right.
yeah. So that's why I respect people on social media that are so honest about their lives. Yep. And we've
Yeah.
interviewed her before. And, if you watch her videos, she shows the good and the bad, which I really respect. So, Belle, if you're watching, you know what? You're doing a great job.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's what I like before we move on. I call myself, when I'm my authentic self or in my tribe, you get to see my good, bad, ugly, bold, and beautiful. Like they're my things. You get it all, okay? Um, but research says, Nick, that mothers experience imposter syndrome at such high rates, and especially when balancing parenting and working responsibilities.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
We're all there. We could all align with that statement.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, this next category was really surprising, but I'll break it down. It's women and marginalized groups. Okay. Now, bear with me. I'll explain this. So, women in STEM. That's STEM. That stands for science, technology, engineering, and maths. Okay. Typically male industries in the past. First generation professionals and minorities in leadership roles. So let's break that down. I'll go to first generation professionals because um, that would be my mum. It's that first generation. She was the first one to go to university. Okay. So that she would probably be more exposed to imposter syndrome than other people. I'll also give you an example of my son, Alex. He was the first to go into the police force. And it's actually quite interesting the culture of the police force. It's generational. If your dad was in it or your mum, it's typically that you would follow. And he was the first in his whole family. So he would have experienced that as well. The minorities part is it could be any cultural diversity. It could be someone with a disability, someone with a different neurological pattern, um, could be someone with a different culture.
Yeah. Yeah. They would all get hit with imposter syndrome pretty hard, I can imagine, because
Yeah.
society and social media are telling us different things to what we're, maybe being brought up with. So it can, yeah, be quite difficult.
Well, can you imagine? Look, when I was 15, I wanted to be a mechanic. But back in that day, girls weren't mechanics. Fortunately, a few years on, they did become it. But if we look in the professions, like engineering, you probably wouldn't get to see many women in that role.
Yeah,
So if they're an engineer in a male-dominated industry, that can be quite intimidating.
definitely. I remember going to my career counselor at TAFE back in the day, feels like a long time ago now. And she said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to be a criminologist." She said, "You're a single mum." She said, "Why don't I show you some secretarial stuff that you can." And I remember looking at her going, "I don't want to be a secretary. Like, I want to be
Yeah.
a criminologist." And she tried to talk me out of it. She said, "No, it's a hard, it's a hard journey to get there. It's so even a woman was telling me that I wasn't able to do those roles. So, we think we're getting those from men, but it's actually
Yeah.
doing it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hope that is changing as much as I believe it is, but I do live in a very positive bubble, and I'm not that person that does have a 9 to 5 job, so I really don't know what a lot of people would experience. But I'm hoping that is changing, and I think that in the era that we are in, that's why I encourage anyone, if you've got a dream, go for it, because you're actually at the time and space on this planet right now where you've got more opportunities and options than ever before.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
Okay. So we've talked about that. This is a fun part. Neurodivergent individuals. I love this section. Autistic, ADHD, and dyslexic. So
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
go there.
Now part, Deb. Yeah. Okay. So why?
Well, like you said, in a conversation we've had before, years of masking symptoms and being told that they were either too much or not enough. So that have you experienced that yourself, Nicole? Like,
Um, I've learned recently, the masking through my whole life.
yeah,
It's quite a lot, and
yeah,
probably I don't feel that anyone's ever told me I'm too much, but I've definitely felt like I'm not enough.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I actually told a friend, and I feel dreadful, once a few years ago, and we have a beautiful working relationship now. But I said to her, because I'm just so I can get sensory overwhelmed. And I just said to her, "Oh, you're just too much, you know?" And fortunately, we are good friends. And she was able to come back to me and go, "Yeah, she's so big and brave and bold," and said, "Yeah, I have heard that before." But I actually felt that I insulted her. Anyway, we've grown. So, yes, please, people, watch what you say to other people.
It's important. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, another reason why is as people this neurological divergent individuals can struggle with executive functioning. I do. Sensory overload. I do. Or communication differences. Executive functioning. When I was at school, I was really overwhelmed with having to be a fast processor, but I'm not. I need to process at a slower rate than probably someone else, you know. But I was at a selective school, and I felt that all these people were so much smarter than me because they could think faster than me. But I was at a selective school, so how did I get in there? You know?
Just as smart as them. You just learn in a different way.
That's it. Exactly. I just learnt in a different way. And what about feeling like they have to work harder to keep up? So what about you? Have you felt like any of that, Nicole?
Um, I think definitely, like, we all know I fall into the overachiever category because I've always
Yeah.
felt do that.
Yeah.
It's funny, the other day I came home and I get to work one day from home, which is really great. And I was
Yes.
at the end of the day, I was laying in my room watching TV, and Dale came in and I said, I don't know why I'm so tired because I was exhausted. And he said to me, Mum, it's people. Your social battery's running out, and
Yeah.
probably so much people every day. You need that one time to depress. So, and then even at my age, I'm still having those moments where I think, yeah, like that's it. That's what it is. So definitely, I feel like I've got to work harder to keep up or prove my worth or just prove that I belong where I am. So, and then that can become exhausting. So then you
You
have that
can.
need to recoup. Yeah.
Because we're not in some categories we're not typically social. And I remember working for a big organization that every month had birthday lunches.
Yeah.
And every other week we were celebrating a birthday. And I get it that they wanted to connect all of their employees. You know, that's a really good strategy. But I felt like I was possibly labeled antisocial, whereas I'm not antisocial. I
Yeah.
just can't do social at work. Like that's where my work is. Yeah, I don't mind if someone stops by my desk back in that day and would have a chat, but I wasn't one that would go and have afternoon tea with the group or, and I was tired.
Thinking too that we have to have that connection, that those fun days, those bonding days, because now we're seeing a lot of neurotypical people. We're seeing people that like don't thrive in that environment. So I think we really need to rethink that structure. The people who want to be sociable, great, let them be sociable. The people who don't thrive to be sociable, give them the opportunity to not have to do that. That's my way of thinking. And I
Yeah,
think about all of this with ADHD,
yeah,
you're just adding a whole new layer to it as well. So, you've got the imposter syndrome, you've got the ASD, and then put the ADHD on top of it. So it's really exhausting, I think, to suffer with imposter syndrome when you're going through these other things as well.
absolutely. So we'll just highlight some research. So autistic professionals report high levels of imposter syndrome due to years of being expected to fit in, like we've talked about. Now, this next one, ADHD, I think of my beautiful sister because I think this is how she felt. ADHD individuals often feel like they're just getting by rather than truly succeeding. And I get that when I spend time with my sister. She's achieved so much, but she feels like she's just that duck on water. Yeah. This is me. The next one, the research says dyslexic individuals may experience self-doubt due to struggles with reading, writing, and processing speed, despite having strong problem solving and creative abilities. Now, in all of my days, no matter how challenging life got or how low I may have got on different things, I never lost my problem solving skills.
Yeah.
It was really interesting.
Yep. But did you feel like you still had to work twice as hard as other people?
Oh, I think it was more, yeah, definitely. And it was more than masking. Like if I kept my mouth shut because I'm an imposter, like they won't know that I don't know what I don't know.
See, I have the dyslexia, but the one with numbers.
Yes.
And it's something that I've struggled with. You would have remembered back in the day of doing our billing sheets. Like
Yes.
Michelle, our lady who did our accounts, she would be ringing me 20 times. Nicole, you need to fix this. Nicole, you need to fix that. And I'm like, how is it that I can write a 40-page report, but I can't do my billing? You know,
I know.
that's where I struggle with numbers, but I've learnt ways over the years to help me with that as well. So it's not so noticeable. And I mean, I'm still not above, sticking my hand up when I'm driving because I know that I have to give way to my right. So I still put my hand up sometimes because I'm like, yeah. So you know what? I think we all have our strategies that we put in place.
We tools, we all need our little toolbox with these things. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's come along.
My dyslexia is about words, so I've had, yeah, as you know, I've known that for many decades now, so I think I've been able to manage it. Yeah.
Asking and coping and adapting. I think that's what we've all had to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about the categories. How about we have a chat about where does imposter syndrome actually come from?
Sounds good. Where does it come from? I'm definitely interested to learn this.
Well, this is another thing. I don't want people to feel like we're pigeonholing them, okay? I want people to look and listen to the strategies or the categories that we talk about and just see if they resonate with you. And again, I'm going to say it doesn't tend to be one thing. It tends to be a multiple thing, a few things that make you who you are. Okay, so I suppose the first place it comes from, or number one, would be early childhood conditioning and perfectionism. Okay. So a huge contributor to imposter syndrome starts in childhood, whether from parents, school, or cultural expectations, even societal expectations. So if anyone that was growing up in a household where they had high parental expectations, a household where they were expected to succeed and failure wasn't tolerated. So that's one example. Um, and I think this is in schools way back when. I don't know. I'm not an educator and I don't want to get into that, but praise focused on achievements rather than effort.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to dismiss the achievers. Okay. But and I don't want to give away things for free to people that haven't actually worked hard. But I do agree that effort needs to be acknowledged.
Definitely. And see, I
Yeah.
come from the other side of that. So I grew up in a house with no expectations.
Yeah.
So I didn't have I guess that I didn't have that pressure on me of like having to overachieve, having to will really do anything, which then turned me into the overachiever because I was always trying, I guess, to get that recognition or something,
It's
just
interesting.
all
Yeah.
come from both sides of the spectrum there. It can, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're not going to go into it too deeply, but just in a nutshell about home life as a child, it tends to be that failure just isn't an option. Um, this actually, look, I can resonate with this next point. Kids labeled as smart now, they often struggle with failure because they're used to getting things right. So I cruised through primary and high school until I turned about 15. And 15 is a year for everyone where, changes happen so much. But all of a sudden, I started to realize that I actually had to study. So because I was just sort of natural in some areas, I didn't have that skill of learning how to study early on, whereas some people might have um, not had that natural skill and had to study and they've learned. So by 15, I was just an absolute wreck because I didn't have that skill set. And I just sort of swung through just because I was clever enough to get to 15. Over that, 15 and over, I actually had to study. Okay. Um, Okay, we've talked about this before, social comparisons and the highlight reel effect, Nick.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's probably coming from how we're like bombarded with things in the media, in social media, where watching TikTok reels, we're watching, 60-second reels of someone's life. So, that's putting pressure on people and how to be a parent, how to be a mother, how to do this, how to do that. It can put a lot of pressure on people.
And you know what's interesting? We seem to compare our behind the scenes reality with someone else's highlight reel. So that doesn't make sense, does it?
No, it doesn't.
What are we doing? Okay. And this is what I mentioned before, Nick. We only see the end. You've seen it because you are a mad follower of some absolutely brilliant people. We only see the end results, not the struggles, not the mistakes, not the learning processes behind their success.
Exactly. So, like, I look at it this way. If you just met me and I've walked into a room and I've said a little bit about myself, you don't know what I've been through. and I've often said I often feel like I'm one of those people that could check like 20 boxes of trauma and experiences, and sometimes I get
Absolutely.
that because it can become quite overwhelming to know that you fit in so many boxes and things. So if I made a 60-second reel of my life, you would see I think successful, happy family, but if you go into
That's right.
it was a hell of a ride to get there. So
No.
and even at my level of my education and my job, I'm still feeling imposter syndrome, although it doesn't affect me as much now because I've learned strategies around dealing with it. So, and that's why I'm hoping, the women that are listening to our podcast can get to that point too, where they have those strategies.
Yeah. Yeah. And before we move on, well, just wrap this part up about social media. And I bang on this about to you, Nicole, all the time because we are a little bit chalk and cheese. But studies show that people who spend more time on social media report higher levels of imposter syndrome due to constant comparison. Exactly everything that we've just talked about, the constant comparison.
I think when you have
We
autism
have
too,
autism.
sometimes you struggle to know where you fit in. And I've struggled with this before as far as, am I meant to look a certain way? Am I meant to dress a certain way? And I often will try and go in and assimilate to an environment and to the people in that, into that job. But then often my true self will come out. So, in a sense, that is a little bit of imposter syndrome because we're trying to fit in and we're trying to, portray an identity that we're not you know
Yeah.
so I think that and that again it's social media, it's showing who we should be, and and then we're taking that feedback in. So but I do spend a bit of time on social media, but I also do it from like promoting our podcast, and
Yeah.
I feel like I'm on two different sides of social media. So yeah, I see it from both sides. So yes, it can cause a little bit more pressure on people.
And I suppose we're focusing on the negative, but I think we just need to let people know what to look out for because it's not all negative. There are positive things. Um, I
Right.
think we should talk about work
What about
because there are common workplace triggers to to enhance that imposter syndrome within the workplace. Unfortunately, they're not positive. Like, first of all, there's the toxic work culture where perfection is expected. So you're not allowed to make a mistake. You know, uh, I refuse to work in an environment like that. I will always work in an environment that embraces mistakes, failure, learning, and the desire to grow. Another thing I found true is the lack of feedback or mentorship. And I've actually have been listening to some older teenagers that are transitioning into the workforce, and what they want the most is someone to give them some positive feedback.
yeah.
So tell them that they're doing a good job, because the feedback from these young people is they're lost. They go and do a job and they actually don't know if they're doing a good job or a bad job. And that eats away at their confidence. And that's apparently another sign of a toxic environment.
And what about feeling different from colleagues?
Yeah, and we've talked about that because, like, as a woman in a male-dominated team, we've talked about cultural differences. Like, you live in Sydney and you would see a lot of different cultures. So you probably would see that in different areas and teams. And what about the youngest, like the youngest and the newer employee, so all sorts of different things. But I think it comes down to tolerance and educating the workplace.
I think it comes back to that mentorship. It's the you can be younger, have a different cultural background, but if you're coming into a company, I think it's the mentorship and the guidance that doesn't matter how old we are, we all have the same job to do. So it's just
Yeah,
really providing that feedback and helping them as well. So and like you said, like lawyers, doctors, brain surgeons, everybody feels this way. So it's, if you're starting a new job and you feel like this, just know that you're not alone, and so many other people out there are feeling the same way.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think you know, like you say, it's even the senior people. They would have experienced that when they had first started as well.
Definitely.
And just because they're senior doesn't mean they're immune to it. All right. They just may not talk about it. And I think that's what we're trying to do is get people to talk about it.
Exactly. Do you have any tips, Deb, like how you've overcome that in the workplace?
Yes, yes, yes. And we probably do. What really resonates for me, and this is that instead of going in, I'm thinking instead of going in critically, whether it's about other people or yourself, go in with a compassion and go in with thinking, how can I help? You know, if you're a senior person, how can I help my team grow? You know, um, you don't want to be disingenuous. If they come to you for feedback, you want to give them the feedback, but you don't want to be beating them up. And then you don't want to be sugarcoating it either. You just want to be real and maybe even share that you were there once.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think that would be a positive thing for a higher senior business person. Um, okay, so I just before we move on to the next point, um, a study by the International Journal of Behavioral Science, I thought you would like this, found that employees in high pressure, performance-based jobs experience the most imposter syndrome, especially those in tech, academia, medicine, and finance. But really, after I'm listening to us talk, it's everywhere. Yeah,
Okay. So if you're working in a job where expectations are high and mistakes are more risky, you're likely to feel more like the imposter.
that's it. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. You feel you've got more pressure on you to
Yeah.
perform.
I've actually something that's helped me over the years, and I watched this on a I don't know if it was a TED talk or like some, webinar or something, but what this guy had said is that you don't need to be the smartest person in the room, but you're there for a reason. So if you can be educated in what you're there for, if you can walk in any room and you will be okay. Like as long as you are prepared for what you're meant to be there. So I think that has helped me over the years. It's making sure that, that I'm doing my job and I know when I walk into the room that I have confidence in my ability of,
Yeah.
you know, there are meetings and things. So it definitely works. So preparation is key, I think.
Did you always feel that way?
It took me a long time to learn that because, um, and I'm still learning about going back and reflecting, and especially learning now that I'm autistic, but I tend to wing things a lot because
Yeah.
work well under chaos. Like I really do. I thrive really well under it. So I've learnt later in life is that if I'm prepared and educated, I can walk into a room and feel confident, and I won't get those like, the panic attacks or the palpitations, or I'll feel like I don't belong there. Like I really feel confident, and it really has brought down the imposter syndrome part of my I think,
Yeah.
yeah, my abilities.
Yeah. That's awesome. And then you've got the ability to be able to share that and teach other people. So your new organization is absolutely blessed to have you.
Thank you.
Now, look, I'm going to go to a little bit of a serious point. Another place that it can come from, the imposter syndrome, we were talking about our childhood, trauma, rejection, and an unstable upbringing. Okay. So growing up in an unstable home where there's, potentially abuse, neglect, even frequent moving can make people feel like they don't have a secure place in the world. Experiencing bullying, exclusion, or discrimination can make someone feel like they must earn their place. Trauma survivors often doubt their self-worth and struggle to trust their own successes, So how about, like, as an example, pardon me, a woman who constantly was criticized by a toxic parent achieves success, but still thinks, if I was really good enough, my parents would have been proud of me.
Yeah. Which is really heartbreaking because it just shows you that imposter syndrome isn't just about work, it's about our fears, and it can, our childhood affects us so much in our adulthood. So it is really sad because that's not something easy to get over.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I'm trying to say. It's not one singular thing. It's a combination, okay? And it is just evolving as you grow. So it will be coming from the childhood, be coming from your society, your culture, your workplace, and the last place, which is really interesting, your brain, okay? So our brain is naturally biased towards self-doubt. So because like neuroscience plays a big role in why we feel like imposters, okay? Naturally, our brain has a negativity bias. We remember failures more intensely than we do successes. Now, I think everyone will be able to relate to this because you can have a day where you get 9 compliments and 1 criticism.
And that's
What
what
do
you're
you hold on to?
the negative one.
The negative one. And it's not woe is us. It's actually a natural thing that we do. Our brain takes over. Um, yeah, there's so much about the neuroscience. So I want people to know that yeah, our brain can trick us sometimes, okay? So I want to give an example. This was a cute little example because I do this. I beat myself up all the time. So say you've got a new teacher that gives a great lesson, but only focuses on that one awkward moment where they forgot a student's name and they think to themselves, I'm a terrible teacher. Now, I know it's just one example, but again, we're focusing on that one awkward moment, and we all have awkward moments.
We do. And it's not easy it is a skill to learn how to focus on the positive rather than the negative. And it's not
Absolutely.
easily learned. I think it can take years sometimes to master that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we both want people to understand that we're wired that way. Okay. So we can always go into that even a little bit more deeper into another podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
But I just want to wrap this section up by saying imposter syndrome, like Nick, doesn't just come out of nowhere. Okay. It's shaped. It's shaped by our childhood, society, our workplaces, and even our brains. Okay. So they're the 4 things that pretty much contribute to imposter syndrome.
So, what we've learned so far is imposter syndrome just doesn't come out of nowhere. It's shaped by our childhood, society, workplaces, or even how our brains work.
Yeah. And now that we understand where it comes from, we can start shifting the way we think about it. Okay.
Okay, which is exactly what we're covering next, how to overcome imposter syndrome and rewiring those thoughts.
Absolutely. So stay with us because next we're going to into real practical ways to break free from imposter syndrome.
Yeah. All right. So far we've talked about where imposter syndrome comes from, but in part two, we're actually going to start talking about how to overcome imposter syndrome.
That's right. That's right. And also how it might affect some relationships. So I like that we're going to move away from work and we're going to actually talk about some of our close relationships.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll see you guys in part two.
She's the one behind the scenes, holding up the broken dreams. wiping tears they never see, lost in the shadows of who she used to be. Does mom have a name? Does she have a face? And she's the one behind the scenes, holding up the broken dreams, wiping tears they never see.